Okay, usual stuff. If you're not actually speaking, could you make sure that you're muted, please? The amount of background noise you can produce is incredible. Apart from that, if you can either put your hand up or use the hand up function or put yourself into chat. All right. Hello, Leighton.
Hi, Chair. How are you?
Okay. Right, okay, so appointment of Vice Chair, please, from the representatives of the voluntary sector. Do we have any nominations?
Chair, we don't
Right,
at this.
okay, Rachel?
Yeah, we don't at this time, Chair. I think it's the current circumstances that we're working in. It's been difficult to get people to commit to something like this at the moment. I'm sure we will be able to find somebody, but I haven't got a nomination at this point.
Okay, so we'll hold that over until the next meeting then, please.
Thank you.
Okay, appointment of the Strong Communities Grant Fund Evaluation Panel representative for the municipal year. Okay, does this need to be a councillor or does this need to be someone from the voluntary sector? Does anyone know?
The most recent appointee is actually Rachel from Glamorgan Voluntary Services. I'm not sure whether she'd like to carry on in post. I think it does need to be a voluntary sector rep, though.
Okay. Rachel, are you happy to carry on?
I'm happy to continue, Chair.
Right. Okay. Thank you very much. Okay. Apologies for absence. I've received these from Christine Cave. Have we any others, please?
Councillor Rob Crowley.
Okay. Right. Okay, let's have a look. Have we heard from Millie Collins or Catherine McCaffer?
I've not heard anything from them, no, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Okay, let's move to the minutes of the meeting for the 7th of October, a year ago. That's unbelievable. Okay, can I accept those as a true record, please? Jane? Yeah, that's it. Yeah, okay, so yes,
just going to second it.
Thank you. Right. Thank you. Is someone speaking? No. Okay. Declarations of interest, please. Any? No. Okay. Right. Presentation then, please. Impact on mental health and wellbeing from the third sector, please. From Cardiff and the Vale Action for Mental Health. Can I ask who's doing this, please?
Linda, I know it's not coming up with an option for you to share your webcam. Do you know if you can still share your screen? Linda, have we got you online still? Oh no, it says she's offline. Could I therefore suggest that we move on to the Public Services Board update while we try and figure out how we can get Linda back online? Is that okay, Chairman?
No, that's absolutely fine. Thank you. So if we can move on to item 7, who's leading on this, please?
That's me, if that's okay, Chair.
Do you want to be able to share your screen, Tom?
I can. I'm not sure if I can. Can I?
I can give you the right to. I just wasn't sure if you had a presentation.
Oh no, I haven't. I'll just talk to the report if that's okay.
Okay. No
This is the annual report which we produce obviously every year from the Public Services. We've referred it on from Cabinet to yourselves as to Liaison, and it's been all town and community councils as well. The reason for bringing it here is to make you aware of, I suppose, the significance of work that's underway to deliver the PSB's 4 wellbeing objectives, which are set by the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act. members will be aware, the Public Services Board brings together statutory partners from Health, Fire and Natural Resources Wales, and also invited participants, including the third sector and town and community councils. And its work is to look at adding value and bringing together and coordinating the work across those public and third sector organisations to improve the wellbeing of residents in the Vale of Glamorgan. There are 4 wellbeing objectives which are set out within the report, and the PSB decided last year that it would be a good idea to focus in on 4 priority areas, and they were around climate change, they're around volunteering in the sense of time making. We did some organisational development work around engagement in order to make sure that the work of the PSB was properly focused, and the annual report provides you with some updates against specific actions that have been taken in the wellbeing plan, and it also draws from a really important evidence base in terms of deprivation, population demographics, and other statistics in order to focus the work around the PSB's activities. As you won't be surprised to know that obviously coronavirus has had a significant impact on all of your partner organisations. So whilst that pandemic obviously began in the latter stages of the 2019-20 year, the annual report does also include for the first time some information around the reflective learning session we ran in the spring with and then early summer with our partners to look at the impacts that coronavirus had on us collectively and equally on our communities and how that might feature going forward. The report provides a huge amount of information but tries to summarise it in the form of case studies, one of which is around the work that we've done in partnership with GPS colleagues around Vale Heroes, and there's some really good and interesting work there. It also then looks at what the priorities should be for the coming year, and that's been the topic of lots of discussion, as Rachel will attest to at recent PSB meetings in terms of what those priorities should be going forward. And clearly coronavirus is one major element of that, but there are lots of other elements as well around things like how we engage our town and community councils in the work of the PSB, how we effectively scrutinise the work of the PSB, and that's been subject to discussion at Corporate Performance and Resources recently, as well as issues of how do we progress the age-friendly agenda across the county and how do we continue to involve young people. At our most recent PSB meeting, we had a really good discussion about how the PSB links with the regional partnership, which is the Integrated Health and Social Care Partnership, and how the work of those 2 partnerships is complementary and how we could potentially join that up in a better way. So, as I say, the report is hugely detailed because of the breadth of the activity that's underway, but I was keen to make sure that third sector colleagues were cited on the work, and if there are any questions that they had about specific priorities, that they could have the opportunity to discuss them here. That's a bit of an overview there.
Okay, thank you very much. Is there anything anybody wants to raise? Okay, can I start off by saying it's very detailed, but I had hoped that we would be able to see it on screen because the print-offs are almost unreadable. Okay, so if I'm looking at the Wellbeing Action Plan updates, Objective 1, for example, they are unreadable because of the way that they've come out on the printer. So there are 6, 7, 8 sides. I can't read any of it.
And so if you want, Catherine, do you want to give me the shared screen access and I'll show the Sway version and I can just quickly meander through the report as it's presented. And I should have said, Chair, the colleagues in Democratic Services have very helpfully showed us or provided you in your pack with a printout, but the report itself has been produced to be shown online. I'm just going to attempt to share my screen now. Do I need to just, can you see my screen now?
Yes, yeah.
So if I'll make that a little bit bigger so you can see it. So what I'll do, if it's okay, Catherine, could you circulate to Councillor Birch and to the other members of the committee the link directly into the SWAY again? Because I think this picks up some of the issues that you were just describing, Chair, in terms of the readability of the report. So you'll see that the report has been produced so that it can be shown online for exactly the reasons that you were just describing in terms of accessibility. So it works through a forward from Neil Moore, who's the chair of the PSB, provides an overview and an introduction to the report and the work of the PSB, including the partners that I was just describing. But I think importantly, it's this section here in terms of those priorities that I was talking about. And what it does is take each of those, for example, the Move More Eat Well plan, it takes those each in turn and gives a little bit of background, talks about what's been achieved and gives the ability for you to interact with some of this information in a little bit more detail, and then talks about achievements and then future direction. And it does that for each of the 4 priority areas in order that some information can be provided in that way. He referred earlier to the case studies, so if I just scroll down through to these. The case studies, I think, are what actually bring this report more to life than anything else. And it's listed here that shows, I think, the breadth of the activity of the PSB, from healthy travel, community safety, volunteering, and things like the smallholders network that have been progressed. So for each of those case studies gives you, again, the background and how it links with the PSB's wellbeing objectives, and again talks about what's been done, what's been achieved, and then equally what the future direction should be for each of those elements. So I think that's the report is more of a kind of interactive one than it has been previously, trying to use some of the technology that's available to us now. So you'll see, for example, in the evidence-based section of the report, there's some interactive Power BI dashboards which allow you to drill into the various information. And previously the report has been produced on the basis of here you go, here's a retrospective of the year, whereas the idea with this version is that it's more interactive, and then people can go in and pick up on different parts of the PSB's activity during the course of the year. So my apologies, I should have taken up Catherine's kind offer to share my screen earlier.
And just to confirm to everyone, if you look at the chat function, I have put a link to the SWAY presentation that Tom was using. So if you want to look at that in more detail yourselves, you can.
Oh, right. Okay. Thank you. Okay. Okay, I'm looking at the chat function. I'm not really seeing that there, Catherine. Sorry. Catherine, I can't hear you.
So sorry about that. I have sent it as an
Yeah, I can see it actually.
audience.
Oh, can you?
I can
I
see
it
it.
as well.
Yeah.
Oh, yes. Right. Oh, right. Okay. Right. Right. Okay. Does anybody have any points that they would like to make? I mean, I'm going to say I welcome the report. It's going to be, I would be quite happy to have the whole thing emailed to me so I could read that in more detail, because I have gone through it and there's quite a lot of that isn't accessible at the moment, but it is an improvement seeing it on screen. Is there anything anybody else would like to say, please? No? In that case, if we could look at the recommendations, please. We're looking at those. I'm happy to move the recommendations. Would anybody else like to make a comment there? Is that Jane with a hand up? Yeah, are you seconding? Right. Okay, in that case, well, I'd like us to accept the recommendations, please. Thank you.
Thank you,
Okay,
Chair.
could we look? Pardon? Oh, right. Thank you, Tom.
I said thank you,
The
Chair.
right. Okay. The annual report, please, or have we managed to get somebody back online to present item 7 to us?
I am going to try and allocate presenter rights to Linda Newton again. Has that come up on your screen now, Linda?
I'm just trying to get the presentation up now. It's a bit slow. It's hopeless. Sorry. Oh, it's all gone slow. I don't know if you might want to go to something else because this is being very slow. I'm so sorry. It was okay earlier on.
Give me 1 second, Linda. I think I can access your presentation from the agenda and I could try sharing my screen. So if everyone could bear with us for 30 seconds, hopefully I'll be
Okay.
able to get it up on.
I did adjust it somewhat, but never mind. Never mind. I've got an adjusted one here, but it just won't come up, will it? Okay. Oh.
Right, I've changed me to the presenter. Is that coming up on all of your screens?
Yes. Yes.
Lovely. Okay. Bear with me. I've not done this for a committee before, but I'll try and move with you through it, Linda. So if you'd like to make a start.
Thank you. This is the old one, isn't it? Thank you very much. Sorry. Right. So sorry, apologies all round because A, couldn't get in, so I was late, probably my fault, and B, I've just created all these problems here for you now. So I'm Linda from Cardiff. Sorry.
I said we welcome the opportunity to see it.
Thank you. I'm Linda from Cardiff Bell Action for Mental Health, and we link with all the voluntary sector groups. Oh, yeah. My screen is gone. Right, sorry, my went back to the old presentation came up. Sorry, so it completely disappeared. So I'm Linda from Cardiff Bell Action for Mental Health, and just say we link with all the voluntary sector groups with an interest in mental health across the Vale and Cardiff, and with people with lived experience to have a voice in how services are planned and delivered. And Rachel from GBS asked me to come and share with you some of the experiences of the third sector agencies in working in the Vale over the last 6 months, and how they've risen to the challenges and what they've been doing. So I just put together this short presentation, and I've eventually been able to show you. So yeah, and just to say a bit about what the voluntary sector, the mental health forum is. We've got over 100 voluntary sector agencies who are part of the forum, and it's a broad church really, because mental health covers all of us, doesn't it? So every group that has an interest can join. So there's lots of community groups, activity groups, groups from BME communities, substance misuse, domestic abuse, housing, homelessness, everything really, because mental health has an impact on all those areas. And over the past 6 months, we've been meeting together to share how we can better meet the needs and our experiences, and how we can better meet the needs for the people using services. So this is being produced really from that and from the input of all the groups in the area. So and I think a lot of this you'll be fully aware of anyway in your roles, and all of us have been affected by COVID over the last 6 months. So I suppose just to say, yes, we're all aware it's massively affected us, isn't it, COVID, in terms of increased uncertainty and the fear and the loss, and all the restrictions we've had to put in place, all the isolation and loneliness and anger and all those issues it's created for us. And then all the changing circumstances as a result, with redundancies, unemployment, income loss, debt, home working, all those has affected all of us, hasn't it? And for some more than most, but I think the effect it's had an impact on all of us. And if you scroll down to the next one, I suppose it would also be the case to say that it's affected, it's shown up the inequalities and structural inequalities within our society, isn't it? And all those that have been affected most have been the ones that were already disadvantaged prior, but it's come up much more in focus and much more emphasis. So there's been a double whammy effect really for BAME communities, those leaving care, domestic abuse, all that list there, people with long-term conditions, and for those already experiencing mental health conditions. So I just wanted to quickly read a comment from the Centre for Mental Health. So they were saying the unequal impact of the virus and lockdown are putting greater pressure on groups and communities whose mental health was already poorer and more precarious before it hit the UK. Groups of people whose mental health is at greatest risk include those with existing mental health problems, people with long-term physical conditions, women and children experiencing violence and abuse, and Black, Asian and minority ethnic communities. Combination of existing structural inequalities and unequal impacts of the pandemic mean that people whose mental health was at greatest risk prior to COVID-19 are likely to bear the brunt of the emergency longer term. Poverty and financial precariousness, racism and discrimination, trauma and isolation have all heightened this time, and I'm sure everybody in their work has noticed that. So yeah, and as it says here, it's affected everybody across all ages. Our people in our forum have voluntary sector agencies in our forum have reported all those, whether older people, adults or young people, have been affected. In terms of young people, agencies have been saying that, I mean, it's been different for different agencies according to which groups they support, but young people aged 16 plus have perhaps most been affected, they have found, by the isolation at a time when most people socialise, don't they? Effect of lack of structure in lives, isolation, reduced social opportunities. But there's a small population for which lockdown has actually been a sort of bit of relief, which is those that have been suffered bullying at school, or so, for example, young trans people, people with autism, especially people feeling suicidal or self-harming. For them, it's been felt a bit of a break. So it hasn't been an even sort of split. Again, similar with adults, really. It's affected adults of all ages, but as all levels. But and you know, agencies have found more, you know, huge numbers of people coming in from members of the public, through much more than normal, through to those with higher, more severe and enduring mental health needs, whom we know have been sort of hanging on by their fingernails. Some have gone back into hospital, lots feeling suicidal. So, but again, some people have coped with restrictions better than others. And some of the feedback we've had with people saying, well, you know, in lockdown, we had more time to focus on myself, wasn't so stressed out by all these social interactions and we have to try and make. So it has varied, but the majority of people have been really severely affected by it. That's been our experience. Do you want to scroll down a bit more? Yeah, and similar with older people, people with dementia, Alzheimer's societies, like I said there, I've seen people deteriorate far more quickly during lockdown, and that it's had a massive effect. And we know from speaking to carers and the lack of respite care and lack of access to day services and respite beds has enormously impacted on people. Talking about screaming in their bathrooms because just with the tension not being any sort of release from that. So, and I know in the last month it's been slightly better, but now we're going back into another lockdown with another long, dark winter period with wet, and we can't meet outdoors so much as we could in the summer. I think we're all feeling that it's going to be, a long, hard winter, and that we need to stay positive and put out positive messages and to keep going with all this, because the longer it goes on, the greater the impact. That's been our experience. And do you want to scroll down a bit more? Yeah, and yes, and the next one too, as I mentioned. Right. It talks here a bit about future impact, but in terms of impact on voluntary sector service, I suppose I would say all agencies have seen an increase in number of contacts, referrals, and people coming through. I know helplines, number of people contacting helplines has doubled. No Beats, for example, has said their contacts have gone up by 96%. Beats supports people with eating disorders. Waiting lists for counselling have grown 3 times. It's gone from, say, 3 months to 9 months. The intensity of the support has increased. So where there's less face-to-face contact now, and people are definitely using more telephone, myriads of types of online support, every sort of way possible to support people online, and resources to enable people to get online, and then different groups and activities and creative ways and online forums and chats, every sort of which way possible has been tried, which I know is the same across the voluntary sector and everywhere, isn't it? It's what we're all trying to do. But the intensity of those contacts and the length of time to support people has increased. So the amount of input has increased at a time when huge greater numbers are coming through. So and at times also for the third sector, especially initially, when some agencies, not all, but were losing their funding if they're relying on fundraising online or through general fundraising. At the same time as there were these more contacts were coming through, and at a time when they had to try and fundraise again on top of that. So at the beginning of the crisis, there was a huge amount of activity, a huge amount of information flow. We were sending out mailings twice a week at least, because things were changing so much and services were changing so much, and people were looking for support. And I know that's reflected with GVS as well. So, but that was a huge time of upheaval, and a huge time when people needed connections all around to find out what was going on. So that got better over the summer, and gradually settled down into these other ways of connections, and back to sort of more face-to-face connections, socially distanced, whether across the garden gate or in parks or on social distance walks, all those sorts of things, and even some group work. But of course now that's coming to a close, isn't it? So we're back to where we are with trying to get people online. And generally the impact of getting people on that has, and I'm sure that's been reflected all across the whole scope of the third sector. It's varied. Some people have loved it. Some people really don't like being online, really, and even young people don't like being online, don't like Zoom, don't like to be seen. So it's a real mixed bag. So as well as those who find it difficult to get online, difficulty paying for things like data, sort of thing. So we're still trying to link out and contact people, and of course we really valued and benefited from all those links, from those new mutual aid groups and those new groups on the ground. But I think people, like older people, have said, well, they loved that during the summer, having more contacts with people. But now people have come off furlough, gone back into work. Those contacts are dried up a bit, so it's back to people feeling lonely at a time when the nights are drawing in, all those sorts of things, really. Yeah, so I don't know if you want to scroll down. I can't remember what I said next. Scroll down. Yeah, so just some quotes here and comments, and you can read them at your leisure if you like. So there's just lots of different voices out there, people's experiences that we've all gathered together. And there's some from young people there, and if you scroll down, there's some from adults and older people too. Yeah. So, yeah. You want to scroll down again, Catherine? Yeah. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so yeah, levels of support have changed, increased, and the complexities increased. But everybody sees the value of supporting people as a preventative approach still. And we're still trying to do that, but really, for a long time, it's been at crisis level and just supporting people with their emotional mental health just to sort of stay together. There's been lots of extra funding coming, partly thanks to you at the council and through GBS, and those partly through people fundraising through trusts. And there's been a lot of trust activity, isn't there, and places for people to apply to, agencies to apply to. And also the Health Board have increased funding on the mental health side. So agencies supporting what they call Tier 0, which is at the community level. Those agencies' funding has been increased by 25%, and that's covered some of those services like counselling or supported self-management, lots of different areas. There's lots of schemes have come in with the Health Board have funded links to GP surgeries now. So if people go to a GP and we're feeling low or emotionally insecure, there's a primary mental health liaison service, and as part of that, there's public sector groups agencies that provide Tier 0 support, and also the Wellbeing for You service. So there's lots of things tied in with GP surgeries now. And although originally those the referrals to primary care liaison service went down because nobody was visiting their GP, and in third sector were able to go out direct and take referrals in directly, so they never did have that problem. But I think things are back up to how they were now in terms of things coming through to the primary care liaison service and also still to the third sector. So there has been another pot of money coming through from WAG for health boards just come through, and the Mental Health Clinic Board are looking at focusing on older people's mental health in relation to that, to older people with emotional and mental health needs and people with dementia. And I think that's in response to the fact that the Memory Clinic, which is run by the Medical Clinical Board, has moved all their dementia advisors out at the beginning of the pandemic into test and traced sort of functions. So there's been none of that service actually, but it was really needed there for people with dementia or their carers. So they feel they want to make up for that gap and support that. So there'll be some more money coming out to the third sector through that, because it'll be in relation to older people. And I think now the Memory Clinic have got a 9 months delay, so people haven't been able to have assessments for memory loss, and now they've got this 9 months waiting list. So that's a huge extra, pressure on carers and those older people themselves with deteriorating memory, and also on the group supporting like Alzheimer's Society and others like that. So so I've said a bit about all the different online forms of activities. If you'd scroll down again, Catherine. Yeah, and I've said a bit about the barriers. There is one, access to IT, as we all know, across the board has, getting people online even, and people's ease with being online is still a barrier, even though there's loads more, isn't there, going on at the moment. But there's still this desire for face-to-face communication. I know people with severe enduring mental health and lived experience have been at their wits' end because face-to-face communication hasn't, it's not been necessarily the first port of call. There's telephone help and Zoom help, but people really do miss. We all miss, don't we? we need the human contact, that face-to-face, to be able to sort of explain how you're feeling. So I know the tensions have become really high, and people's feelings of suicidal ideation and feelings that have increased. So as I said, a number of people have gone back into hospital through that. And I think long term, there's a bit of a concern that that will be the permanent way in future for developing services. I know the Welsh Government and the health boards are looking at changing services to sort of online and telephone being the first port of call and face-to-face if people want it. But I think there's a lot of concern about how much face-to-face there will be in that. At a time when people feel they can't express themselves so much online or on the telephone, and the nuances aren't there. We've also seen that in the A&E department at the moment, haven't we? So young people, especially often, and people who are self-harming have used A&E, have gone up to A&E for help, and the mental health crisis team is still based there, but of course that's now gone over to telephone only, so people need to telephone to get a meeting slot. If they can get one, it might be that they're turned away. And I think our concern is that people can't express how they're feeling enough. They might not get through, might not be able to receive the support, and we just want to sort of monitor, I think, how that will go in terms of people's needs and suicide and all that sort of side of things. So I know that's across the UK as well, that feeling, that sort of need to monitor that. Yeah. So, and solutions, yeah. So I suppose there have been lots of new funding bids, and that's been really positive, and lots of new increased ways of supporting people and connecting, and lots of resources. People got resources in to enable people to get online, to give them tablets, to help them get a supply of data. And new initiatives have worked, like Alzheimer's is saying, somebody with dementia, their face lit up when they saw others on the screen. So things do work, you know. But, and I suppose also through the Mental Health Forum, we've got together a partnership fundraising plan so that we can, if people have shared what they're all doing, and look to putting partnership bids in to get more funding in, for example, around mental health and perhaps debt and financial advice, because obviously debt, you know, it's quite a big cause of suicide, and in that sense, so things like that to sort of help, and yeah, just to sort of work together to make sure that we support people in the best ways we can. So we continue to put reports into the Mental Health Clinical Board and to feed back into the Mental Health Partnership Board, which we facilitate and is led by people with lived experience, but which would be great if you would like to come along to as councillors. You'd be very much welcome. So the next one is in November, and that is looking at the new Together for Mental Health Delivery Plan coming through from Welsh Government that they've just released in the light of COVID. So we'll be looking at and feedback from people with lived experience on that. And it's multi-stakeholder, anybody is welcome to come along. Of course, that'll be online, lots of Zoom breakout groups, I hope, so we'll have a chance to talk about things a bit more. And finally, I think we all feel we need to just keep on sending a positive message, because that's the time we're in at the moment. I've just done a little scroll through. I've got an update on my on the new slides I've done, but there's some different examples of some of the services that are coming through. So you can look at them at your leisure if you like, but there's riverside advice, provide welfare rights in the Vale as well as in Cardiff. Got a lot more resources to provide services. That's for carers and people with mental health needs. Can you scroll through? There's loads of things there. Platform, we've done loads of things for young people. They've got young people develop their own website, a Vimeo group, lots of contact one-to-one, lots of different groups online. I know Rebuild have got their GVS, haven't they? We've got their voluntary and their wellbeing sessions, and that's going well. Platforms also got their peer mentoring project still going. Mind in the Vale have, their services have gone up massively, and they've got increased demand and managed to see 1,700 people over the last 6 months. they've got lots of different services like guided self-help, counselling, online courses on Zoom about managing stress and anxiety, parent welfare calls, outreach, that sort of thing. Talked about beats. So you want to scroll up again? I realise the time is going, so I want to carry on. Carers Trust South East Wales, they've re-established a telephone counselling line for older people, peer support groups through Zoom, the Reverend Carers Gateway, and also through our Dementia Friendly Communities grant. That's one grant we facilitate. There's been half a dozen more, at least more, community services come along, and CTSW, we've got some of that money to develop carers awareness training. There's also activities groups through that with lots of local groups like Motion Control Dance in the Vale, so that ways of linking. I know over the summer they've been meeting and linking with older people, and Vale Ways had resources through that, linking with people with dementia, and lots of others like that. So it's, although it's a little bit of money, that's been a really positive outcome. Yeah, Pobble, that's supporting people. They've got a new housing support drop-in that they've started up over the summer, and yeah, just a bit about what we do really. So we've developed a lot more online groups with people with lived experience, and online forums, and socially distanced summer meets, and it's got some free online training, got some funding through for free online training, especially for suicide and self-harm. So we're advertising that at the moment for groups, so hopefully link more with those new groups and peer groups who might be able to make the most of that. And as I said, all those service summaries that we have to be pumping out. Yeah, that's it. And we've got a little link to the summary we do. And yeah, I suppose what we can do together for the future is a thing, and any partnerships with local authority would be really welcome. What we can do together and how we can improve and develop more, be really happy to share. If anyone would like to come along to the Mental Health Forum, we hold that online. Got one tomorrow, so people are, you're very welcome to join and come along. And any issues you think might be worth sharing with us, or feel would be useful to share, that'd be great.
I think people would be interested if you could send them the link, certainly. Great,
Lovely, I'll do that then. That'd be brilliant. So, yeah, sometimes it's a bit more easy now online, isn't it, to actually,
yes,
so that's one positive. What do you think? Once like me, you've overcome the technical barriers that it's all a learning curve, isn't it? Right, so thank you for listening. I've whittled on too long.
No, you've put the flesh on the bones of the report. I mean, I think most of us would be grateful for a copy of the slides, which would be very useful. And if you could send us the link to the Mental Health Fora, which are going to take place. Right, I'd like to thank you for that. I think it's something that's been of concern to a lot of us. We know about people who are losing their jobs and so forth, and the actual physical results of lockdown, but the mental health ones are likely to have much longer ramifications, I think. So I'm very grateful for that report. Thank you. Would anybody like to make a comment, please?
I would. Sorry, Hayley Smith from Bernardo's. Firstly, hi. Sorry, I'm
so glad you're there, Hayley, because I in my other feedback I did some information about what Bernardo's do, and I was knowing you were going to be there, so I want to see you. So if you want to sort of say what you're doing, that'd be great, because on this one it wasn't there. So.
No, Linda, I owe you an apology actually, because you did ask me for some information and I just couldn't get it to you in a timely fashion to update on what we are doing. And I won't go into too much detail, just that I echo everything Linda said, and thank you for putting that together as succinctly as you have, because within that there's just so much that has crossed all sectors. And I know from our perspective, we've actually, in the Vale Schools-Based Counselling Service, we've seen a decline in the number of children and young people who have wanted to take up counselling. So we've actually had hugely reduced caseloads and staff kind of working through small numbers of young people who've wanted to do the session either online or on the telephone. But what it's meant is that we've carried over a waiting list for those young people waiting for face-to-face work. And we're now, I mean, we've done extensive risk assessing, and we're hopeful to be back in schools now. Okay, we've just had the news today, but it will mean we can still go back into schools and work with the year 7 and 8 after the half term, with a view to reinstating or resuming normal delivery, I suppose, as the best we can. All schools have accommodated us going in terms of the rooms that we need and the PPE. So I think the response and the can-do attitude has been outstanding. But we've also seen in our family wellbeing service in Cardiff an increase in adults accessing counselling and support for their wellbeing and mental health. And children and young people initially didn't seem. I think what you mentioned about some of the issues of lockdown were removed for lots of children and young people around school and school-related anxieties and bullying. It doesn't correlate though. Ideally, well, it doesn't correlate really with what we're seeing in the schools-based counselling service. The only kind of explanation I can offer without doing a detailed study is that perhaps because when young people thought schools were closed, that all those associated services had stopped. So even though we'd done extensive media and social media campaigns and adverts, we still didn't see much of an increase coming forward. But what I also wanted to add, kind of trying to keep it a bit short because I'm conscious of time, is that it's the impact on the staff who are actually delivering the services. So obviously individual staff have had their own level of anxieties, and it's been managing that as well as ensuring delivery of services and making sure that staff are okay while they're doing that. And I say that our first episode psychosis service, we actually only stopped face-to-face for a very brief period while we were risk assessing. So we've been working throughout the whole of lockdown. We've even been running groups, and at this point, until this week, we're running 5 groups a week. We do those in a central location in Cardiff Castle, actually, in Butte Park, because we've got all the facilities of drinks and toilets and that around us. But there was a period where there was nowhere open for drinks or toilets, so the staff were just really creative and resourceful in, the timings of their sessions. So we did see an increase in relapse of those very unwell young people and more hospital admissions during the early period. And what we'll revert back to now is maintaining the one-to-one, because you're absolutely right, Linda. It's the isolation and the lack of that social interaction has been a huge factor. So it's been so varied across services. But yeah, it's also mindful of the staff within that as well. Anyway, that was all I wanted to add. Thank you.
Yeah. And I would echo that, because all the staff dealing with one-to-one counselling and support have all been struggling. I know people have gone back into the office environment because working from home and holding all that support, all those emotional needs of other people has been dire, hasn't it? And it's really affected people because they're in their home environments. I know lots of agencies, people have gone back into the work environment because of that.
Okay, does anybody else have a comment that they'd like to make, please? It's Vanette.
Thank you. It was a query really. I'm really interested in this, and so thank you, Linda, for bringing this to us. The one area that I'm particularly interested in is the amazing befriending support that the voluntary sector has offered during the sort of lockdown period and since. And you sort of mentioned about people going back to work, so therefore they're not available as much. Have you got any idea? Because it's obviously something that is really important for us to understand as a local authority. Have you got any idea of the sort of the scale of need, sort of how many people contacted local voluntary organisations for befriending support during the lockdown. You know, I'm not talking down to the nearest one, but are we talking dozens? Are we talking hundreds or whatever? What do we think the shortfall might be currently? And is this an area? Because I know that there are voluntary groups now that are still ready and waiting to support. So it's one of those things about, is there still quite a sizable need, and how do we mobilise support to meet that need?
Yeah, and at the moment, I would say I haven't got my finger on what the need is, but we could find out. I could find that out through the members. I know so that'd be a good thing we could take back to the members and find out. So
that would be really helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, I know Alzheimer's Society have got I've got set up a telephone befriending service, companion callers service, and they're hoping to extend that. So that's one element. But it'd be really good. Thank you. It'd be really good to sort of get a handle on that and then come back to you and to link with a.
I know that I was talking to one voluntary group who were sort of helping people, whether it be with shopping or with befriending or whatever, and it was quite amazing the impact on the volunteers. And so people who weren't engaged with their local community were suddenly realizing that there were all sorts of, you know, really good people around them that they could interact with. And so what was a befriending service or befriending support actually became a support network for the befriender. So, you know, there's lots of learning that we've got from that, and it would be really good to see if we could quantify it a bit.
Yeah, that sounds a brilliant idea.
If I might, Chair, at this point,
Right.
just really say that there are some considerable issues for all of those small groups that set up during the last few months to support their very local communities. And some of it's already been touched on, the fact that people have gone back to work. Okay, we're into shortly going to go into another period of lockdown. But the connections, a lot of the connections were made during that first period. And what we found is that not many more people are falling through the cracks, as it were, with regards to the services that Councillor Burnett just mentioned, the shopping, the prescription pickup, and then the associated befriending that has come from that. Some relationships have developed from somebody dropping off the shopping or dropping off the prescription, and that seems to have continued, and that's been absolutely wonderful to see. It's been really and truly inspirational to see how local communities have actually stepped up to the plate to deliver and support people within their own localities, and that's been across the whole of the Vale, from tiny communities through to you know, individual areas within the larger towns. So there is some data out there. It's not as clear as we'd like it to be, because those groups are run by volunteers and they don't necessarily have the wherewithal to engage in or the time to engage in answering questionnaires, etc. We've sent out lots of questionnaires throughout the last 6 months, and the return on them has not been that fantastic, but it's something that we're continuously working on.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else got another comment they'd like to make? No. Okay, in that case, can I welcome the report and note it? And if you would be happy to send out A, the presentation, and B, the link for the mental health forum, that would be very useful. Thank you.
Chairman, can I just confirm that we had a seconder for noting the report?
Yes, second.
Wonderful.
Right.
Also, can I just check that Councillor Norman is still connected, because her camera's frozen for me. I just want to double check she's still online.
Jane? Jane?
I'm still here.
Wonderful.
Okay.
Sorry, your camera was just frozen. I wanted to make sure we were still correct.
Yeah, because we seem to have lost Councillor
Right.
Rowland, don't we?
Yes.
Yes, Councillor Rowlands did notify me in the chat. He had to leave. He's given his apologies.
Okay, thank you. Okay, could we look at the voluntary services annual report then, please? Who's going to lead on that, please? Is that you, Rachel?
It is indeed, Chair. The first report, if I might, is actually looking at the response to COVID. And I understand that you have received these reports from Catherine. I really wanted to touch on some of the things that we've already talked about with Linda's presentation, but perhaps to broaden it out for the whole of the local sector, and then narrow it down, looking at the way that GVS has been working throughout this period. So back in March, we actually shut up shop as far as our physical office presence was concerned, and moved very, very quickly to delivery of services online. So we did that actually on the 17th of March. And then within a week or so, we were working with the Vale Council to develop Vale Heroes. And I think Thomas touched on that, and he's used it as an example in the PSB annual report. And actually it is an extraordinarily good example of how third sector and local authority speedily work together to ensure that we were able to provide the right sort of services for individuals who were going into shielding and supporting them throughout that time. So Vale Heroes ended up being a website that had lots of information around directories of the sorts of services that were available. Those directories around the third sector were developed by GVS and uploaded onto the website. And then the important and most effective element, I guess, was the referral program that we set up in conjunction with Age Connects and the local authority. So individuals who were shielding, who had no idea how they were going to get food, prescriptions, whatever it might be, were able to contact the local authority. Local authority would then look to see whether they were individuals who already had a care package. If they were transferred through to social services. If they were individuals who perhaps did actually need a care package, equally they were put through to social services. Then those individuals who were over 65 but not in receipt of a care package and not necessarily going to be in a position to receive a care package were put through to Age Connects, who were able then to sort out shopping, prescription pickup, dog walking, you name it, all sorts of activities that were undertaken by Age Connects across both Cardiff and Vale, but in particular the partnership working that was undertaken here in the Vale of Glamorgan. And anybody under 65 was referred through to GVS, and we coordinated the forwarding and connection of the COVID-19 groups that had started to set up on Facebook. So we're able to take individuals who were perhaps based in St Athan and link them immediately into their local COVID groups so that we could get the services that they required in place for them almost instantaneously. And I know that Councillor Burnett will be very aware of the excellent work that one of the groups in Penarth undertook, and that was Helping Hands in Penarth. And the range of activities that they were able to deliver for local people was quite phenomenal. And the numbers of volunteers that came forward was equally quite phenomenal. So the report looks at all of these different elements. It looks at the volunteering and how across the Vale the numbers of people rose to the challenge to come and help in their local communities. And if you look at point 2.10, which is on page 3, you'll be able to spot that in the previous year, 1920, we were receiving roughly exactly 293 inquiries throughout the whole year, which actually worked out to about 24 new volunteers coming into being each month. Whereas if you jump down to the next section, you will see that we, between March and August, GVS dealt with over 1,072 individuals coming forward to volunteer, which is quite a phenomenal increase. And obviously it was in response to everything that was going on in all forms of media, whether it was the main media or social media, and people wanting to help and wanting to support their local communities, family, friends, whoever it might be. So absolutely astonishing numbers that we were fielding at that point in time, and passing them on to local COVID groups, established third sector organisations that were able to continue to deliver their services, because many were not able to deliver. But Dinas Powys Voluntary Concern, the Age Connects for Cardiff and Vale, and then, as I said, the numerous COVID-19 Facebook groups that were stepping into the breach. So absolutely inspirational and really phenomenal activity undertaken by people living here in the communities of the Vale of Glamorgan. You can see in point 215 on page 4, there's a list of some of the activities that GVS was involved in that were directly related to COVID-19. We were, of course, continuing our day jobs in supporting the local sector, and we still were receiving inquiries about governance issues, funding issues. We continued to provide training, which we very quickly morphed onto a digital platform. And we were very delighted to be able to see how many of the third sector organisations operating in our area equally moved so quickly to be able to deliver their services, maybe in a slightly different form, but they were still delivering services to people of the Vale by going online and providing a digital connection. The key area, I guess, for many of our member organisations and other groups within the Vale was the fact that we were able to manage and deliver very quickly financial support and aid to these groups. Part of the discussions with Tom, as it so happened, around Vale Heroes meant that we were given £2,000 from Vale Council to distribute in as quick a way as we possibly could to those COVID-19 groups that were just setting up. So the sorts of things they were purchasing were mobile phones. They were producing leaflets, they were developing their Facebook pages, they were purchasing things that would identify their volunteers so that they could easily deliver the services that we were asking them and Vale Heroes were asking them to get on board and help us to get to individuals within our communities. So you'll see further down in the report that we, I think it's 2.23, we were able to bring into the Vale just over 274,000 within a very short period of time, just a few months. So the first one, and you know, I think kudos to the Vale on this, was that we had that 2K almost immediately that we were able to allocate to groups within the Vale. Welsh Government came online then with additional funding of 25k, also to enable that sort of activity. Then Comic Relief came online, so there was a further 26k. We also manage the Third Sector Capital Investment Fund, which is integrated care fund monies of 140,000. And that really did help a lot of organisations with regards to updating their digital equipment to enable them to deliver their services online. And then via the Vale Social Services, we received the 51,000, again integrated care fund monies, but it did actually come through Vale Council, that was aimed at older people and the sorts of preventative interventions that third sector organisations could engage in. So that resource was gratefully received. And then in August and into September, the Cardiff and Vale Health Charity provided, actually it says 30k there, but it was 33k, to enable us to continue to support organisations and help them move through the most challenging point in COVID, which had obviously been earlier in the year. But that money has helped organisations to further develop and morph services to enable them to continue in, you know, what is still an extraordinarily challenging time for all of us, but certainly for third sector, where a lot of their usual income generation and fundraising activities have totally ceased. And they have struggled dramatically. So these small amounts of resource that have come in have been absolutely vital to the health and well-being of organisations and groups that are operating here in the Vale. So a big thank you to partners in the local authority, big thank you to Welsh Government and to our partners in health, and to Comic Relief for enabling us to get that money out to groups as quickly and effectively as possible. And that's probably the area that groups have found most beneficial with regards to how GVS has been in place. I think one of the things that we've also been at the forefront of, because we have a building in Llantwit Major, a community centre, community facility, we've tried to get that up and running again as quickly as we could. And we're able, therefore, to share our lived experience of the issues, the problems, the challenges that all local groups who run community centres were likely to face. And together with our partners in the local authority, we managed and hosted an event that brought together all of those community centres that are run by volunteer committees throughout the Vale, to share experiences, to clarify the ever-changing guidance that was coming through as to what you could and couldn't do in a community centre, and also to share with groups the sorts of activities that we were able to run and the sorts of equipment, PPE, risk assessments, etc., that we were undertaking, and to share our experience across the Vale to enable other centres to open. Obviously, what was announced today will impact quite considerably on what we and other community centres are able to continue to deliver. Linda mentioned one of our projects, the Rebuild project that's based in Llantwit Major, and we were able to very, very quickly deliver online support services. So we morphed our face-to-face in-person activities, so things like a wellbeing cafe and various other activities, we were able to put them online, so that via Zoom and other mechanisms we were able to get people together. We have run craft sessions, yoga sessions, laughter yoga, you name it, all sorts of activities have been happening online for Rebuild. And we trained up volunteers through Rebuild to help us reopen and our food share offer at CF61 in Llantwit Major, and that has been running since the start of August and the start of the school summer holidays. So trying to address some of the major food poverty issues that I think we've all become very aware of during this time, and those are not going away. I think as we come out of furlough support, we're going to find more and more families that are experiencing that horror of food poverty and not being able to provide the sort of food that they like to for their children. And we certainly need to ensure those sorts of services continue. And Tom Baring organised a meeting that brought together Food Bank, ourselves, and the school in Llantwit Major, and others, to ensure that we work together to make sure that we've got the right sort of support in place to help people through this extraordinarily difficult and challenging time. At this point, Chair, I'm happy to answer questions. If not, I will move on to the next report, as it were.
Okay, thank you very much. Does anybody have a question they'd like to ask? No? Okay, moving seamlessly on to your next report then, please, Rachel.
I will try my best, Chair.
Thank you.
Just to confirm, are we going with the recommendation that we are noting the contents of the reports?
You happy to do that? Good, thank you. Yep, that's been seconded.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Chair. The next report is an element of that's required by the deed of grant, through which GVS receives resource from the local authority. And each year we bring to you a summary of the activity that we've undertaken during the previous financial year. Our AGM is coming up in November, and this sort of information is included in our impact report and our audited accounts and trustees report. So it's really just to give you a taste and a summary of the sorts of activities that GVS, as the local county voluntary council, has been undertaking throughout the 12 months for the year 1920. So you can see the website has been vitally important. Anything to do with things digital are obviously more and more of import to all agencies, whether they're statutory or third sector. And I guess for third sector, it's about finding the resource to enable us to keep up to date and on top of the sorts of digital improvements that we all need to be having in place to make sure that we can effectively deliver our services. So currently GVS, while our website is our current website is pretty good, it's been in place since 2015, and we are currently developing a new website which we would hope to have coming online in April 21. So constantly looking at how we can improve our digital offer to our members and partners. Social media, absolutely vitally important. And you know, the interesting thing for us, if I could take one example that comes up later in the report, is that usually in Volunteers Week, which is the first week in June each year, we would hold a variety of physical events and would probably interact with maybe 100 or so individuals throughout that week. This year, because we were not able to hold those physical activities and events, we put all of our effort into social media, and the numbers you will see later in the report actually are quite phenomenal as to how many people we managed to make contact with and engage with during Volunteers Week. So the challenges being met, and challenges that have made us I think like everybody, learn very, very quickly about how we change the manner in which we deliver our services and how we learn from the experience that we've had during the last few months. So you'll see there that we, with other third sector support Wales organisations, other county voluntary councils and WCVA, have developed a variety of digital platforms to help deliver services across Wales. They don't come without teething problems, that is for sure, and some of that has impacted on our numbers, etc., for volunteering, but we're through those teething troubles, and they do seem to be working more effectively in this financial year. Yes, you'll see there that we continue to deliver on our support services for the third sector, so development and advice services, looking at governance issues for organisations, helping new organisations set up, helping organisations become registered charities, and that together with our information service is absolutely vital to the local sector, never more so than in the times that we're currently living in. So you will see that Vista is a quarterly magazine. It's published in-house 4 times a year and goes out to 900 groups and individuals. And we also send out weekly health and social care bulletins and funding bulletins and a general e-bulletin as well. So we were already doing a lot of this, but those elements have become even more important for our membership and the wider sector. Practical services, well, you might think that during the COVID crisis that we were not going to be able to deliver on that. We're not delivering as many as we did in the previous year that the report refers to, but we have still managed to ensure that we are providing equipment and printing services to those organisations that need it. Our networks and fora, well, they've gone online, hasn't everybody? We're zooming left, right and centre on things like that. But last year you'll see that we had a variety of network meetings that met the brief for our partners and our membership in sharing information, and that's what the networks are all about. It's getting information from the third sector to our partners in local authority and health, and getting information from partners in local authority and health back out to the sector. So it's an extraordinarily useful mechanism for that two-way sharing of information. You've already heard me talk about how important funding is to the third sector. Well, we in 1920 were providing information and support to 140 groups throughout the year. And what we've had reported back from those groups is that that intervention helped them bring in just over £381,000 as a direct result of our input and support. There's a funding newsletter I talked about, and we also hold funding events where there are surgeries basically, so we invite major funders to come along and meet on a face-to-face basis with groups that have booked a session, so booked an appointment at the surgery because they've already got an idea or a project that they're starting to work up, and they want to get an idea of whether a particular funder would welcome and support that particular bid for funding. So absolutely vital mechanism for groups that are geared up to bidding into some of the larger funding trusts and funding makers. Yeah. Training service during that year, you'll see the range of topics. We don't decide ourselves what we're going to deliver on funding. Obviously, external activities come into play, so GDPR was certainly one that played a part in that financial year. But we undertake a membership questionnaire survey each year, and we go on the requests for the sorts of funding that our members want, and that's what we deliver throughout the year. You'll see a very long list of all of the partnership working and the joint working activity that we undertook during that year. There's a key area for us is the health and social care and well-being. You know, the majority of third sector organisations fall under that heading. Certainly well-being, it covers the majority of our member groups. So there's an excellent network that has that met throughout that year. And again, it's that mechanism for getting information into our partners and out of our partners to ensure that we're all working effectively together for the benefit of individuals and communities here in the Vale of Glamorgan. Talked a fair bit about volunteering. Each year we have been holding a volunteering fair, usually in January, and this past year it was in January 2020. We had a good attendance at that, with 264 people visiting our event at the Memorial Hall in Barry. We had 63 organisations with stands there, and the conversion rate from the 264 people who visited was that 197 people from that event signed up to volunteer with a wide variety of third sector organisations. So a really useful way for us to get volunteering profile higher in the minds of our public here in the Vale of Glamorgan. We also held a variety of mini volunteer events, actually highlighting the activities and volunteering opportunities that were available in Cowbridge, Llanthwaite Major and Penarth. So that's what we were focusing on, was getting people into those events who wanted to volunteer locally with local organisations. And you can see from that that was equally as effective. We do a fair bit of work with young people throughout the year, including bringing into the Vale, I'm trying to think how much it is, it's around about 20,000 I think in total resource, just over 7,000 of which has to be allocated by a grants panel that is made up of local young people. So that's a really interesting and, again, inspirational activity that we're engaging with. Those young people really do put the applications and the applicants through hoops, and they take the decision as to where the resource is going to go. And that's been extraordinarily effective over the last few years. We're in the process of doing that again this year, but obviously it's being done remotely and digitally. So the call is out at the moment for bids into our Dish Out the Dosh fund that we administer here in the Vale. So Rebuild, I think I've talked about that, been fantastic the way that project has taken off and was going great guns in CF61, and then COVID hit and it had to transfer online, and they've done a remarkable job of doing that very, very quick, speedily and very, very effectively, and the feedback from participants has been very positive. Yes, people want to meet face to face, but in the absence of that, having group activities online really does make a considerable difference to people. Then we talk about our environmental impact, our efficiency savings, and refer to some of the other projects that we manage. So Connected Carers is a consortium project that's big lottery funded. And I'm sure that this committee will be very interested in this, because you will remember some considerable time ago you provided funding for GVS, or VCVS as it was then, to develop consortia for local groups to be able to bid in for money together. That was the flavour of the month a few years ago. It's less so these days, but we still have a project that has been working very, very effectively across Cardiff and Vale, and you can see who the partners are there: Touch Trust, then the Cardiff and Vale Parents Federation. So that's been about supporting carers and providing all sorts of activities for them, and respite to ensure that they do actually get some time for themselves. That has been very, very challenging during the last few months, but surprisingly, that support has continued, and I think that the outcomes from that project have been quite considerable for all of the carers involved in it. Then there was the Third Sector Locality Officer project. This was something that was funded by Cardiff and Vale University Health Board, and they wanted to look particularly at the Western Vale to see what sort of activities were taking place in the Western Vale around health and social care, and basically undertaking some in-depth activities to ascertain the sorts of activities, so mapping and gapping of what the people delivering services in the Western Vale would like to see for the future. DEWIS, well, you'll be aware of that. Vale Council receives resource to continue to enable the DEWIS portal. They get the resource from Welsh Government, and they share some of that with GVS to enable us to make sure that third sector activities and organisations are listed on that particular portal. And then equally, you will be aware that GVS bid for and was successful in purchasing a 99-year lease of the former Llantrwch Major Youth Centre from the local authority, and we have spent a large amount of resource on upgrading that building and developing it into a community facility that's open to all, still including youth services. So we've, the youth in the Western Vale are still receiving a service, or they will be when we eventually, or youth services come back up and running. But all sorts of activities have been undertaken there during that 12-month period, and you can see that in the report. So I guess we believe that we're very well placed to serve and support the local third sector and communities here in the Vale of Glamorgan. Obviously, the whole sector is working within constrained economic environment, and we've been no different in that in the light of the pandemic. Funders and partners, we're all being hit by the austerity that's come with the impact of COVID-19, and the knock-on to the sector is quite dramatic. And I guess as we move forward, we as a membership organisation will continue to see that we've got organisations and groups disappearing because of the lack of resource, but equally we've got new organisations setting up to step into the gaps that have been highlighted by the pandemic itself. So it's really important that as an organisation we continue to make as many efficiency savings as we can, and we've certainly been successful in doing that in the last 12 months. But I guess we all understand that the times that we're operating in at the moment are extraordinarily challenging, and the future really does depend for ourselves and the wider third sector on the manner and level of support that we gain from our partners in local authority and in health. So it's really a plea to ensure that the level of funding for the third sector doesn't dip in the next financial year, and that we look at ways of working together to ensure that we're getting the best possible value for money out of any service that we're delivering here in the Vale of Glamorgan. And the best way to do that is for us to work together in partnership as effectively as we've done in the past, but possibly on a greater scale as we move forward. That's it from me, Chair, on that particular report. I'm happy to answer questions.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Jane.
Thank you. Thank you, Rachel. Just going back to your point about connected carers, how do you support the young carers in the society, which obviously now with children not being in school, they've got more pressure on them at home to support parents or other siblings with problems. Obviously, there's a lot more pressure on these children. They haven't got the escape of going to school. So how do you go about helping those?
This particular project, Councillor Norman, wasn't aimed at young people. You've actually got somebody in the meeting from Barnardo's, and they with other third sector organisations who support children and young people, focus in on supporting young carers. But this particular project, Connected Carers, was about older carers.
Okay, Jane, do you want to come back?
I appreciate that. But what I'm saying is, what are you doing to help the younger carers? Or is it completely out of your remit?
It's currently out of our remit because there are experts out there in Barnardo's and Action for Children who've got years and years of experience of working with young carers. I don't know whether Suzanne Clifton would wish to input at this point for the sorts of contracts that the local authority have in place for third sector organisations to work with children and young people, but they're not delivered by GVS and not through the Connected Carers project, which was standalone, funded by Lottery and dealing with older carers.
Thank you for that.
It's okay.
Okay, thank you. Has anyone else got a comment or a question? No? Okay, in that case, thank you very much for that report, and I would like us to accept the recommendation, please. Are you happy to do that? Okay, thank you, Jane. And Rachel, I'm sorry, but it's you again.
Yeah, I'm sorry too, Chair.
I can imagine.
three out. Absolutely. This is a report that we try and bring to the Joint Liaison Committee on an annual basis, and it looks at a formula that we use to work out the economic value of volunteering here in the Vale of Glamorgan. So you can see from the report that we use a particular formula, and when we started doing this through the auspices of the Vale Volunteer Bureau back in the year 2000, the value of volunteering was actually then calculated to be just over £8 million worth. Since then, it has grown dramatically, and last year there was a figure, and the last year I'm referring to is 18-19. There was a figure of over 40 million. Now, during 1920, we undertook the same exercise of taking the formula that is commonly used across the UK, but because we'd had those problems with our web portal for volunteering, the numbers were reduced. So whereas in 1819 the figure had been over 40 million, in 1920 you can see that the figure was 36 million, just over that. So while that's disappointing for that year, there are reasons behind it. It's still an enormous figure, I think you'll all agree. And when we look at the amount of investment that our partners in the local authority undertake, which is approximately £500,000 in grants to the voluntary sector, you can see that it's a very small investment for, I think I've worded it there as a staggering return in voluntary activity within the Vale of Glamorgan. Now, you'll remember back to the first report that I covered this evening, that we have had an enormous jump in the number of people engaged in volunteering here in the Vale of Glamorgan in this current financial year, so not the one that this report refers to. So one would anticipate that we will see a massive rise in the value of volunteering for the year 2021. But, you know, I still feel that £36 million worth of volunteering activity here in the Vale of Glamorgan is something that we should all be extraordinarily proud of. And I recommend the report to the committee. Thank you very much.
Yes, I mean, it is staggering the amount of work that people are doing in no expectation of reward, and I think it's a tremendously positive lesson that we could all take from it, even in the current situation that we're undergoing at the moment. Okay, would anybody like to make a comment, please? Liz?
It's just me being curious again, really. Because you have such a sort of diversity of groups and organisations that you work with, and it would be really interesting to understand, in terms of that sort of 30 million, what the breakdown was in terms of types of volunteering, and whether or not that's available anywhere. Because, you know, you were talking earlier about an awful lot of your groups being sort of health and well-being. Well, is that reflected in the amount of volunteering activity? Or, you know, we know that there are groups that do outdoor stuff, or there are groups that, you know, there's all sorts of things. And are there sort of segments?
I would argue, Liz, that that well-being covers all of those activities, sporting activities, environmental activities. They all form part of well-being for the volunteers who are involved in delivering those services and the recipients of those activities. We have always found it quite a struggle to get our third sector members to provide us with in-depth detail of what the volunteers are actually engaged in. It's a survey that goes out each year, and we do find that large sections of it are not completed, probably because people don't particularly enjoy completing online surveys, and you know, the people that we're sending these to are extraordinarily busy, and basically they're just trying to complete the form as quickly as they can and get it back to us, so that it's one job off their list of many activities that they have to undertake. I think one of the things that we're likely to find during the next 12 months is that the age of volunteers will have shifted. So last year, the larger number of volunteers, and I haven't got the figures in front of me, but I can certainly dig those out for you, were people over the age of retirement, so 55 and above. Whereas, as we all understand, a large number of those people in the past 6-7 months have actually withdrawn from volunteering because of health issues, health fears, many actually shielding themselves and voluntarily self-isolating. So I think that's probably what we're going to see as we move forward, is that the working age group, so those people probably from 18 through to 55, 60, are those that have stepped up to the plate in this current financial year. And that's certainly what I would be expecting to see from the survey that we'll be undertaking later this year.
Okay, thank you very much. Does anybody else have a question or a comment? No? Okay, thank you very much for that, Rachel. You've done an absolute marathon session today, and I thank you for that. Congratulations.
Sadly,
I know what
this
it's
is
like.
only water.
I know what it's like to talk for a living. Okay, if we look at the recommendations, please, we've got 2 here. We accept the report for information. We're happy to do that. Yep, and then we refer it to Cabinet as well. You happy to do that? Yep, thank you very much, Jane. Okay,
Thank you.
as far as I know, there is nothing else. No? Okay, thank you very much for coming, and perhaps we'll be off by the time we have the next meeting. We might be offline and actually in person. I find that much
Let's hope.
more enjoyable. Okay, thank you very much, everyone. Thank you, Catherine.
Thank
Good
you.
night.
Thank you. Thank you. Good night.
Thanks all.
Thank you. Good night.